Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to tackle one of the most essential, but honestly one of the most misunderstood molecules in all of biology, carbohydrates. We're going to go from simple sugar bricks all the way up to these massive functional structures. Let's find out what they're really all about.
So, to get our brains warmed up, here's a little puzzle for you. What on earth could possibly connect a slice of bread, a spoonful of table sugar, and the hard protective shell of a beetle? I know, it sounds like a totally random collection of things, right? But the answer is the same for all of them, and it all comes down to the beautiful chemistry of carbohydrates. All right, here's our game plan. We're going to start small, really small, with the basic building blocks. Then we'll see how they snap together to build the huge structures that literally power and build the world around us. It's going to be a fun ride from simple to complex. Okay, let's dive right into section 1. So, what are carbohydrates, really? Let's pin down a clear definition.
You know, the name carbohydrate itself gives us a massive clue. Carbo, that's for carbon. And hydrate, well, that sounds like water, right? And if you look at the basic formula, that's exactly what it is. For every carbon atom, you've pretty much got one molecule of water attached. So these are our go-to fuel source in nature, but they're also the starting point for building tons of other important biomolecules.
So, carbs come in 3 main families, and it's all about size. The easiest way to think about it is with a building analogy. Monosaccharides, those are your individual bricks. Now stick a few of those bricks together, say 2 to 10, and you've got oligosaccharides, kind of like a small section of a wall. But when you link up hundreds or thousands, that's when you get polysaccharides, these enormous, complex structures.
So, let's zoom in and get a good look at those individual bricks. It's time to properly meet the monosaccharides.
Okay, so these simple sugars basically come in 2 main flavors, aldoses and ketoses. And the only difference between them is where this one specific chemical group, called a carbonyl group, is located. If it's sitting at the very end of the carbon chain, boom, you've got an aldose, like glucose. But if that same group is tucked away somewhere in the middle of the chain, it's a ketose, like fructose. It's such a tiny, subtle change, but it creates completely different molecules with different properties.
And speaking of glucose, here it is, the absolute celebrity of the sugar world, D-glucose. This is a 6-carbon aldose, and it is the central fuel source for pretty much all life on this planet. When you need a quick burst of energy, this is the molecule your body is screaming for. So we're going to be using D-glucose as our main example from here on out.
All right, next up, you might be picturing these sugars as just straight floppy chains. But the thing is, inside a cell, which is mostly water, they almost never stay that way. They actually prefer to fold up into a much more stable and compact shape.
So here's our D-glucose molecule again, all stretched out in its linear form. It's a little bit wobbly and unstable like this, you know? Its ends are chemically reactive and just kind of hanging out there.
And to fix that instability, the chain just bends around and its 2 ends react with each other to form a closed ring. It's the exact same set of atoms, nothing added, nothing taken away. They're just rearranged into this nice, tidy, much less reactive shape. It's kind of like a snake biting its own tail to get comfortable. Now, depending on which atoms do the connecting, these rings can actually have different sizes. The 2 most common are the 6-membered ring, called a pyranose, which is the most stable shape for glucose, and the 5-membered furanose ring, which is the shape that fructose prefers to take.
Okay, so we've got our nice, stable sugar bricks in their ring shapes. The big question now is, how do we join them together to build something bigger? Well, the answer lies in a special connection called the glycosidic bond.
The glycosidic bond is basically the molecular mortar that holds all of our sugar bricks together. It's a really strong chemical link that forms when 2 sugar rings join up. And it's this exact bond that allows us to build everything from simple pairs all the way up to those massive chains we talked about earlier. And you see this chemistry literally every day. When you stick 2 glucose units together, you get maltose. That's the sugar used in brewing beer. If you link a galactose to a glucose, you get lactose, the sugar found in milk. And when you combine 1 glucose with 1 fructose, well, that gives you sucrose, which is just plain old table sugar. Now that we know how to build the chains, let's check out the real skyscrapers of the carbohydrate world, the polysaccharides. In this last section, we're going to see what these giants actually do. So when you link up thousands and thousands of these monosaccharides, the giant molecules you get, the polysaccharides, they usually have one of 2 main jobs. Either they act as these really compact, efficient energy stores,
or they form these incredibly strong, rigid materials that are used for structural support. And this is absolutely fascinating. Check this out. Both starch and cellulose are just long chains of glucose. That's it. The only difference between them is a tiny little flip in the geometry of the glycosidic bond connecting the glucose units. The bond in starch creates this loose, coiled shape that our bodies can easily break down for energy. Think potatoes and rice. But the slightly different bond in cellulose creates a perfectly straight, rigid fiber. These fibers stack up to form things like wood and cotton, incredibly strong materials that we can't digest for fuel. A tiny chemical tweak, a world of difference in function. It's incredible.
And the diversity is just amazing. Plants store their energy as starch. We animals use something called glycogen, which is just a more branched version, in our liver and muscles. Plants build their structures with cellulose, and that beetle shell from our riddle at the beginning, that's made of chitin, which is also used by fungi. Even bacteria use their own unique polysaccharide to build their cell walls. It just shows how unbelievably versatile these simple sugar chains can be.
So, we've seen carbohydrates as fuel tanks and as building materials, but that brings us to one final really mind-bending idea. What if these complex sugar chains, especially when they're attached to proteins on the surface of our cells, are more than just structure? What if they're actually a kind of secret language, a code that our cells use to recognize and talk to each other? Something to think about.